and I would like to welcome our students to this student town hall. I do want to make sure that everybody in the town hall knows that this meeting is being recorded by the university's media services department. I do want to start by thanking all of the students very much for adhering to all of the public health guidance that we have put out as a university. As a result of students following all the public health guidance, you know that our COVID numbers have been low this year. And so I think we've had great cooperation from students, faculty, and staff, and I want to be sure to thank you for that. Also want to thank Dennis McDermott and the student government for the ongoing communication that we've had on a variety of issues, including the issue that we are here to talk about today. And we want to thank the student governments for suggesting to us that we have a town hall meeting. So the format for the meeting is that we have received questions in advance. Those went directly to Dean Keith Palo. They've been sorted according to the experts on our team who can answer them, and we've grouped them together according to the expert who will be answering. We will also be monitoring the questions that are coming in, and if we have time before the end of the town hall, we can take some of those questions. We do have a hard stop at 5:30 today, and the reason for that is because we have an admitted students day for prospective students that a number of the participants at today's meeting need to get to. So roughly around 5:28, there'll be a group of people leaving this meeting and moving to another virtual meeting for admitted students. So just before we start asking the questions, and I'll ask the questions and call on the person to answer the question. But before we do that, I just want to say that this past year has been extremely challenging for all of us as a result of the pandemic. I think it's fair to say that the pandemic has turned all of our lives upside down in a wide variety of ways. Schools all across the country, K through 12, colleges, universities, all of education, all of higher education has been significantly impacted by this pandemic. And our goal, Point Park's goal from the very beginning of this pandemic, which was 1 year ago today, from the very beginning of the pandemic, our focus was on students and helping to make sure that students were able to receive a top quality higher education and to stay on schedule for graduation. That's always been our goal. We've had a lot of challenges thrown our way, but our goal has always been to focus on what's best for the students. We appreciate the input we've received along the way from students. And so as a result of the pandemic, we've been very clear with the university community that our enrollment for this year was lower than what we had budgeted. That is not a phenomenon unto Point Park alone. Schools across the country have experienced lower than expected enrollments this year due to the pandemic. Our housing numbers are lower this year. So the revenue that's coming into the university is less than expected, and the revenue coming into the university does not equal our annual expenditures. The Board of Trustees approved an operating budget for this year with a $7.5 million loss. Whatever the loss ends up being, the university's cash reserves will be able to cover that for this year. But that's not something that we can cover over multiple years. Also, it is a requirement of the government and of accreditation agencies that schools must balance their annual operating budgets. Annual revenues must equal annual expenditures. Now, the government and accreditors understand we're all faced with a pandemic this year. And so they know that we're all doing everything we can to make it work for this year, possibly into next year and the following year. But the goal has to be, we're required, the goal has to be that we get our annual expenditures to equal our annual revenues, not one-time revenues, but annual revenues that are coming in. And as a result of the loss that we're taking, and as a result of the loss that we're anticipating for next year, we've had to reduce operating expenditures this year, and we have to reduce operating expenditures for next year. Those reductions do include a reduction in the number of full-time faculty teaching at Point Park University. It's a very, very difficult decision. We've had to make some difficult decisions with staff positions this year, and we don't take any of this lightly. That's by way of background. One of the questions came in asking about commencement. We will have an announcement this week regarding the university's commencement ceremony. Another question that came in was dealing with the fall term. What will the fall term look like? Will it be on campus or not? We will have an announcement this week regarding the fall term. Moving on with the questions that came in related to the pandemic, as well as the non-renewal of non-tenured faculty. Students have sent letters of support, and they want to know where they go to. So when we receive letters of support regarding faculty or certain faculty, they go directly to our Chief Academic Officer, who is Dr. Jonas Prida. Dr. Prida, would you like to comment on letters that you have received from students?
Only in that, continue to send them to me. Those of you who have sent them to me, you know that I read them. I can't comment specifically on the faculty member because of the arbitration that's going on, but at least you know that there'll be somebody on the other end of the email, so you're not just shouting into the void. So again, Jonas Prida at jprida@pointpark.edu. You all know me.
Thank you, Jonas. The next question. I've been told that between retiring professors and non-renewed faculty, the political science and legal studies majors will have no more full-time faculty. Is this true, Dr. Prida?
It could be true. As of right now, it is, yes. That there are no full-time faculty people in poli-sci and legal studies. It doesn't mean you're not going to get a good education in taking those classes in poli-sci and legal studies. It just means we don't have a full-time person in there right now.
Thank you. Next question. The student says, I have been informed that professors get paid very little for independent study classes, and many students believe that they pale in comparison to the actual course. Was it considered that many students might be hesitant to enroll at Point Park if issues like these exist, further exacerbating the enrollment problem? Dr. Prida.
So I can speak to the quality control issue on independent studies, and they meet the same learning outcomes as any other course does. Oftentimes it might feel slightly more awkward because you might be in the class with just one or two other people, but the faculty person is asking out of you the same skill level that they would be asking out of you in any other course. As far as if it is going to reduce enrollment because these independent studies are happening, I can't comment on that because I can't see the future.
Thank you. The next question. What were the criteria used to determine which faculty would not be renewed? Did student input factor into these decisions?
I'm sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. Can we slow down for 1 second here? I understand that we are in a hurry to get through all these questions and stuff like that and make sure we get to the admitted students to the event, but some of these answers we're giving deserve elaboration. I think if we continue to go through and answer these questions rapid fire like this, it's going to do the students a disservice. When you say that you don't believe, when the political science and legal studies majors, you don't believe that we can still keep up with the quality, how are we going to do that? We were told, you just said that may very well be the case, that we don't have any full-time faculty. Well, you can say that you're going to keep the quality up in that program, in those programs, but I think students want to hear how. Very few students have trust that we can just say that's going to be perfect. That's going to be everything we need it to be. Don't worry about it. I don't want to railroad through all these questions if we can. And I understand we're in a hurry, but if we need to take more time at another date to answer more of these questions, that's something we can do. I still think we need to give due process to each one of them.
Yeah, so Dennis, how would you like to do that? Would you like to submit that as a follow-up question to be answered after we get through the questions? Or do you want to interject along the way? And do we allow anybody to interject along the way? I guess I'm just want to be clear on the format.
Yeah, well, sorry, I thought we had agreed to this format beforehand, but we have changed a little bit before so that I understand if there's confusion. But if I could just be able to, and since the other students haven't been given the opportunity to have their camera shown, then I'm the only one really with the opportunity to interject in that scenario. If I could ask follow-up questions after questions have been answered, that probably would be the best way of doing it.
Okay, that's fine. I just want to make sure that we're clear that we've got a total of 15 questions that we.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. And to me, it feels like we've answered maybe one or two of them.
Okay. Okay, so the follow-up question from Dennis, Dr. Prida, is how will you ensure the quality in the political science and legal studies?
And any major losing significant amount of full-time faculty.
Okay.
Because I trust deans and chairs, frankly, that they'll make responsible choices for the faculty that will teach those classes. And again, I don't mean that to be a flippant answer, but I have, in the same way that we have no way of knowing if any faculty is going to be good or bad, right? And so I trust that chairs and deans, when they hire people to be replacements for these faculty people who were non-renewed, that these people are going to be qualified, competent, and good in the classroom.
But when we tell them the deans and chairs of these programs that we're going to cut full-time faculty from their program and just kind of say to them, bring it back up to where it was before, you understand what that sounds like. We've cut every single full-time faculty from the political science and legal studies major. It's not the only two majors that are experiencing that deficit. And we've just told the deans and chairs that they need to bring it back up to the quality it was before. Is that what we're saying?
Yes. That again is designed to be part of their responsibilities and job is to help make that happen. And okay, again, sorry.
Yeah, perhaps I don't know. I would have thought that maybe we could have had a dean, or just as an example, in attendance to further elaborate on that question. If I can't get an answer here in this town hall, if that's supposed to be all students.
Yeah, we don't have a dean with us today, Dennis. We can certainly, that would be Dr. Thomas, who is working with the chairs in the School of Arts and Sciences, who can follow up with you directly if you'd like.
Okay. In terms of okay, we can move on to the next question.
Okay, the next question. What were the criteria used to determine which faculty would not be renewed? And did
we skipped over question 6.
Yeah, we rearranged this because of who's answering, Dennis. So what were the criteria used to determine which faculty would not be renewed? Because Dr. Prida is answering this, Dennis. Did student input factor into these decisions, and who was included in the decision process? Dr. Prida.
You bet. So here is a list of criteria that was used, and this was also specific to various schools. So not every decision was made using these same criteria. They were things such as service, or how well does it support the university's stated mission? How well does it support the school, right? School of Comm, Roland School of Business, their stated sort of operational mission. What were sort of retention numbers in there? What were the arc of more students in or fewer students in? So it was never any one of those things, right? It's a combination of all of those things that help try to provide a holistic portrait of who these faculty were that were not renewed. And I just want to get this out for everybody right now. None of these faculty were not renewed because they did a poor job, right? Every one of these people was an excellent faculty person. So it had nothing to do with performance. It has everything to do with the fact that we're in a pandemic, and there was a budget concern that we didn't want the entire university to close.
And just to address one part of the question, was student input factored into any of the decisions? In any form, shape, or form whatsoever?
So not in student evaluations, because we know that student evaluations oftentimes are extremely biased against faculty members, and that we get so few of them. Sometimes it's challenging to have them be useful. But with things like NESE data and some of those indirect student surveys that we have them take, that helps inform at the department and school level on how well stuff is working. And so when it's asking like, how many engaged courses are you taking, right? These kind of things that you may have taken on a NESE survey at some point, that's indirect student input that is important.
So when we knew that we couldn't have something like we knew this couldn't happen. We knew we couldn't have the direct student involvement through the issue of student surveys or the student reviews of the faculty. Was there any thought to maybe supplement that through some other direct student involvement in the decision process, perhaps by including them in the meetings, or any sort of way to make sure students would have a direct say in what happened?
No, as far as my understanding on this, and I don't even know if it would necessarily be appropriate because of the contractual agreement behind all this, right? It's not just picking your favorite professor.
No, and of course I understand.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
But I do know there is ways students could have been involved in this. I was just wondering if we were trying to think of more ways, even within the contract, to involve students more, if that line of thinking or that type of conversation was happening.
It hadn't when I was there, but fair point.
Yeah, and going forward, Dennis, you and I have talked about how we can work with students on the things that we're able to work with students on. Personnel decisions at the university, that's something we would have to sit down and talk with you, and also Lisa Stefanko, the Vice President for Human Resources, who's on the call, as well as the university attorney, to make sure that we're following the law and following the collective bargaining agreement.
Yeah, I look forward to that next time.
Thank you, Dennis. Now we're doing number 6, Dennis. We're
Okay.
back on order. What do you have to say about the fact that the majority of faculty, this is the way the question's written. What do you have to say about the fact that the majority of faculty being cut are women and or immigrants and or BIPOC or LGBTQ+? How are you going to make up for the loss of that diversity of experience? And that will be the Vice President for Human Resources, Lisa Stefanko.
Yep. So I just want to address that question in terms of how the process that we use whenever there's any sort of a reduction in force. So we know that when a reduction is going to happen, that we want to make sure that there's not any particular group of people who are part of a protected class that are affected. So every time, and this is just HR practice, whether it was at Point Park or anywhere else that I've worked, every time a reduction is made, we do an analysis to ensure that the percentage of people in any sort of a protected category that are affected by the displacement is at least similar to the percentage of people in that category in the entire unit eligible for displacement. So in this case, what we need to remember is that the percentage of people who were in the population that could be not renewed for next year is different than the percentage of all faculty. So in this case, the people who were in the population that could be not renewed skewed more heavily towards women in particular. So when we look at the number of people who ultimately got the non-renewal letters, those also skewed more heavily towards women, but not disproportionately so. regarding, we do the same type of analysis for people of color, and for other populations, with the exception of LGBTQ plus community in participation, simply because it's not data that we collect. So we wouldn't have data to say this is the number of people who we have at the university that are members, because we don't ask people to affirm their sexual identity when they come to work at the university. So it's just not data that we have. So so that's the answer to that part. And then I'm going to let Jonas answer the second part of that question.
Which is on the question about how do we continue to drive diversity and inclusion at the university. And that's again a fair question by whomever asked this, is like, how are we going to do this? And I think it's done in a couple different ways. One is by the other hirings that are going on campus. We continue to really look and make sure that we have an inclusive search process to allow us to get diverse faculty and staff. That would be one. And the secondly is doing what we're doing now, right? Where 4 of the 4 people whose faces I see on this screen are involved in material for diversity, equity, and inclusion on campus. And so it's not a solution that comes up, that we can't solve that problem in 1 year. And so it's a long haul to get back to where it was. And I think we just have to acknowledge that this worked against many people. Let's acknowledge that, but we also need to acknowledge that the future is where this direction, or is where this conversation needs to go.
Yeah, I'm very happy that all 4 of us on the screen here are working for things like diversity and inclusion. That is the case, but all 4 of us on the screen here don't exactly represent hugely diverse groups in our skin color, or I can't assume anything else beyond that. So it's just, we knew when we had to go through this process. We were aware when we were bringing non-tenured faculty back. We knew you would have to equal the makeup and percentage of non-tenured faculty. That is something we are aware of. And we knew that non-tenured faculty were also the most diverse faculty we have at the university. I just think in terms of the student body, and I understand that we said that this was something we had to do, but there were other options, I believe, and the student body believes that, and we can't be made to believe otherwise because of the information we are given and the transparency we are given, that there weren't other options, and we will never know that, and now we are stuck with this decision.
Actually, we will address that, Dennis. That's one of the later questions. So we will address that.
Yep, thank you.
Yep. So we'll go on to number 8, Dennis. Okay. Number 8, this is the question as it was submitted. What are the criteria the university has to follow based on the collective bargaining agreement when letting faculty go? Do you have to cut non-tenured faculty first? That question is for our Vice President for Human Resources, Lisa Stefanko.
So the way that the collective bargaining agreement is written, and I think there have been links to the agreement available for people to review themselves as well. The way that it's written, the university, when needing to change the number of full-time faculty members that we have, the non-renewal process is the process that's available for that. I will say this is the very heart of the contract language dispute that is currently being moved to arbitration, and we'll have that arbitration before the end of the semester. So once we have that arbitration, the arbitrator will make a decision about the interpretation of that language to say it was either done properly or it was not done properly. And then we'll follow the arbitrator's guidance because that's what is in the collective bargaining agreement to do. So in answer to the question, the way that the university reads the information, and I think there's not a dispute that non-tenured faculty are the first that have to be up for non-renewal, but that is all outlined in the collective bargaining agreement. I missed part of that question.
Right, no, I think you got it.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you.
Dennis, okay to move forward? Okay, thank you. So now, Dennis, this next question addresses, I think, what you were alluding to a few minutes ago. What budget cuts were made before the decision to terminate these faculty? And that will go to our Senior Vice President for Finance and Operations, Bridget Mankosh.
Hi, everyone. So regarding budget cuts, so our budget deficit that we projected was $7.5 million. What we wanted to do is we wanted to reduce the budget by at least $3 million. So we wanted to make budget cuts at a minimum of $3 million. Ideally, you want to cover the whole thing, but that was our target, at least $3 million. And right now, we're over the 3 million. We're a little bit over the 3 million right now. And that was before the decision was made to do the non-renewals.
So to get to your specific question, Dennis, there were a number of things that have already been done, but it's not enough to satisfy the current loss for this year as well as the projected loss for next year.
Yeah, and I'm aware of that. I understand. I don't know if every student's aware that cuts were made before, or how much the faculty non-renewals will contribute to covering that budget loss. But I'm also aware that the information students are given about the budget doesn't inform a good faith argument for us to know what cuts would be beneficial, or the students as customers to really have an informed discussion about this. Even me, when I'm able to attend all of these meetings, I cannot have an informed discussion about anything. I cannot suggest or even advocate for any alternatives because I don't have enough information to advocate for such a cause.
Okay, thank you. Okay, to move on to the next one, Dennis?
Yeah.
So the next one, how much is the budget deficit that you are trying to cover? I believe we've answered that. The current year is $7.5 million. Bridget, is there anything you want to add to that?
No.
Okay to move on, Dennis? Okay. The next question, what concerted fundraising efforts have you attempted in order to cover this gap? And that will go back to Bridget Mankosh.
Okay, so we've, in addition to the Federal CARES Act funding that we received to help with the budget, we generated an additional $1 million to help cover this gap.
Dennis, okay to proceed to the next question? Okay, thank you. This question, why is it that only athletes can use the weights in the student center? We all pay the same amount of tuition and should all be entitled to the resources available that we are paying for. And that's going to be our Dean of Students, Keith Palo, Vice President for Student Affairs, Keith Palo.
Thanks, Dr. Hennigan. Thanks, everybody. Yes, as we return to campus in our Return to Campus Guide, and we are a gym, so out in both the federal, state, and local restrictions and so on, we follow those rules and regulations. Even out in the community, you'll notice at your local gyms, they were at 50%, and they have to be monitored at all times. The way our gym is set up, the free weights area in the back is separated from the cardio where our desk is at. So both on a sense of the number of people that we could have capacity and the way that that's monitored kept us from opening that up to everyone at the time. Obviously, the coaches, the statement made, and of course what was being monitored, and we watch this closely also, is when an athlete or athletic group is in the back area using weights, a coach has to be present at all times. They have to be monitored because they have to make sure that they're wearing their masks, that they're socially distanced, that they're cleaning the equipment. So the concern was more of transmitting any type of the virus and so on if it was kind of not closely watched. And of course, the way our staffing is and so on prevented us in the way that that area was set up. Now, the governor just yesterday increased that capacity to 75% in gyms, along with restaurants and so on. So we are going to revisit that and see if we have the ability as of April 4th, to open that area up to more students because of the capacity issues being increased. So we are taking another look at that.
Thanks, Keith. Dennis, okay to continue? Okay, so on to the next question, which has a number of bullet points below it. As the question is written, who are the highest paid people in the higher level on administration, including the board, and what are they paid? So first of all, the Board of Trustees are volunteers. No member of the Board of Trustees is paid. All board members are volunteers. Salary information at the university is confidential. However, we are required, the university is required to file a Form 990 with the federal government. And that Form 990 information is publicly available, and that can be accessed by just about anybody. So you can find that information for certain years through the 990 form. Okay to keep going, Dennis?
Did we kind of go through the bullet points on that?
Oh yeah, I plan to go through all the bullet.
Yep. I'm fine.
Okay. Is this pay rate justifiable in consideration of the level of work they do? So there's a requirement by the Internal Revenue Service that we are not allowed to pay folks above what is known as reasonable market salaries. And we have to, as a not-for-profit organization, we have to demonstrate that in the 990 to the Internal Revenue Service. So we do benchmarking, and we have an independent source, qualified expert independent source that does the benchmarking for most of our salaries, not just the administrators, but most of our salaries, to make sure that we are in compliance with the IRS regulations. We also have annual goals and objectives for all of the administrators and most of our employees, and there are annual performance reviews done for all of our employees. The next bullet is, what is the money coming in from the raised tuition going to specifically? So I think this gets to the issue of tuition transparency, which Dennis and the student government have initiated that conversation with the administration. And we've shared with Dennis and with the student government a draft pie chart that shows where tuition dollars go. We'll share that draft pie chart on the screen right now, Dennis. And then Dennis and the student government have asked that we provide all students with this information going forward, which we will do in a letter that will be going out to students soon. So this is a draft of a pie chart we've shared with Dennis and the student government. And Bridget, if you're able to share your screen, you may not be able to share your screen yet. If you can't,
Yeah, I'm trying to, for some reason, I'm having trouble.
okay, Dennis, we're going to come back to that. And I'm going to ask Tom in media services to make sure that Bridget has the share screen function. And
Right.
just,
I got it. There it is.
yep, Tom, thank you very
There,
much.
sorry about that.
Yeah, so this is the pie chart that when students ask how tuition dollars are spent, this is a typical model that is used to present information to students. And so when you look at the very large blue area, instruction and student services, as well as financial aid, this is financial aid that is going directly to students, you will see that that makes up 2/3 of the university operating budget. So 2/3 of every dollar that's coming into the university is going directly toward the students' education and the support of the students, the direct education and support of students. And then because we're running a university that has a campus, we have a number of other expenditures. Bridget, you gave a very good explanation at the student government meeting of just some of the things that make up those other categories that benefit students, but we don't put them into the two categories that directly benefit students. Do you just want to kind of go around from operation, maintenance and plan, just kind of quickly go around there and highlight a couple of the things that benefit students as well?
So operation, maintenance, and plant, those are the facilities. Those are the student center. Those are all the academic spaces in the university. So that's really, what's in there. Employee benefits, that's really the faculty and the staff that support the university. Room and board, this is our facility costs for housing and food service. What pays, we would help support the food service area. General institution, a big area in there is IT support, information technology, and the provost and the academic administration is a lot of that's in there. General administration, that's areas like the registrar, the business office, human resources. I'm trying to think of some other areas. The president's office, finance office, different areas like that are in general administration. And external affairs is fundraising and development.
Thank you, Bridget. So this is what we've been working with Dennis and the student government on. And as I said before, Dennis has asked us to make sure that we transmit this in the form of a letter to all students, which we will do. And we've committed to Dennis that we will do that. Okay to move on, Dennis? Okay, so the next bullet point under that question, who were the people that decided to fire the 17 non-tenured staff? So I don't want to play games with semantics here, but we have to be very clear. These faculty were not fired. So there were not performance issues. There was nothing egregious, no egregious behavior. The faculty were not fired. Their contracts were not renewed according to the collective bargaining agreement. The decisions were made by the deans and the provost and submitted to me as a recommendation. And I, as the university president, ultimately made the decision. The next bullet, considering the level of pushback towards the announcement, the word that's used in the question is the firings. I'm going to change that word from this point forward to non-renewals because these faculty members were not fired. They were not renewed. Will the previously mentioned staff remain with us for the next semester? So I think how I'm reading that is for the fall term. And the answer is no. The faculty who were not renewed are not renewed for the fall term. They're here for the spring term, but they're not here for the fall term. The next bullet, as it is written, considering that it is largely agreed upon that the faculty are the best part of the university and that most students pick this school specifically for its faculty, does it make sense to not renew beloved teachers at the potential risk of losing students to other universities? As the question is written, no, it does not make sense. An extremely difficult decision. However, we've got approximately 4,000 students at the university, all of whom have academic schedules and academic goals. If we don't take if we don't do the difficult things that we need to do to make sure that our budget is balanced, we will put 4,000 students in jeopardy. And so we don't ever want to lose resources at the university. We want as many resources as we can at the university serving our students. But when we're faced with multi-year operating budget deficits based on something that none of us had any control over, we have to make the difficult decisions to make sure that all 4,000 of our current students and future students will have the resources that they need for a quality education. That's the end of those bullets for that question, Dennis. Is it okay to proceed?
Yep.
So the next question, what is the relationship between the university's two top leaders stepping down this year and the decision not to renew 17 full-time faculty? So I think the reference here is that the provost, John Pearson, has decided to retire this year. He actually moved his retirement date forward to January, which is why Jonas Prida is our provost right now. And then I think it's also in reference to my decision that I will be retiring this summer as well. There's absolutely no relationship between either of the decisions of the provost or myself to retire and the decision that we need to make to not renew the full-time faculty. There's no relationship. Next question, Dennis. So the next question, it has to do with salary. I'm not going to read the whole question because some of the numbers in the question are not accurate, but the question is, the implication is that senior level people at Point Park and other universities make a lot of money. And so the specific question is, what have the senior level people at Point Park done with regard to their salaries to help contribute to the negative effects of the pandemic? And the answer to that question is that the senior officers of the university, including myself, took a voluntary 10% pay reduction prior to the beginning of this year. So Dennis, I think we've gotten through all of the questions. It looks like it's 5:12. We've probably got maybe another 10 minutes or so remaining before some folks are going to have to start moving on to the Admitted Students Day. How would you like to handle the rest of the meeting? And I'll ask that of Dennis and Dean Palo.
If there's a few questions in the Q&A, if you would like to address any of those, I just ask that I'm given the opportunity to close out the meeting when that time comes.
Okay, so I'm looking at these questions now on my screen. Why should the enrolled students pay for the price of lost revenue that the university has failed to make? We have costs that need to be met on an annual basis. And so the students are paying the tuition for their current year. The university is going to absorb a loss this year. So we're not passing on the loss that the university will absorb this year to our current students. We, the university, will absorb that loss. The next question I'm looking at, if the university is losing revenue, why did the federal work study program get reallocated this year, taking the approximately 15 student workers that get donations to the school down to 3 workers that are unable to get the same amount of donations? Let me just see if there's anybody. Bridget, are you able to answer that, or is that something that we need Lisa or George Santucci to follow up with Dennis on?
I can't. I'm not sure I understand the question enough to be able to answer it.
Yeah,
Lisa,
Dennis,
do you?
I think the question is about phone-a-thon. I don't know the answer, but I can get it.
Yeah, so Dennis, we'll get you an answer to that question, so we've got it precisely. The next question. You claim that a criteria that was looked at was in the impact on schools' goal in providing us with good education, but how does taking away the one and only faculty member who can teach me what I am here to learn align with that mission? I know that I am not the only person who feels like their education would be deeply impacted by losing some of these full-time faculty members. Jonas, is there anything that you want to add to your earlier answer in that regard?
Only this, and this is not going to be particularly helpful, I don't think, to students, but I think it's worth saying, is that the passion that students have defended their faculty members has been amazing, right? Of the amount of messages that I've gotten like this shows the relationship I think that the faculty make here. And again, this isn't going to, like, I can't say anything magical to make you feel better about it. I'm just making an observation of, thank you for caring so much about your faculty members. This is a terrible situation for all of us to be in. And if there were some way out of it, we would have found it.
And then, as Jonas said earlier, he will be working with the deans and the department chair to make sure that the courses that need to be taught in those areas will indeed be taught by faculty members. Dennis, did you have your hand up? Was there some?
Uh, I, okay, I heard, I do want to address, I heard that there was a potential solution to addressing the lack of faculty in some programs would be bringing in visiting full-time faculty. Is that something that is correct? That was something I was told before.
Yeah, you heard that from Jonas, and Jonas, do you want to confirm that, please? That is an option that we have?
That is an option in specific disciplines I don't want to talk much about it because I can't really make the answer right now. Lisa, do you have anything on the visiting component to this? And I'm not trying to walk around it. I just don't want to give a false response.
Yep. We utilize the position of visiting faculty member often in different departments, and we have provisions in the negotiations that we've had with the union that visiting faculty can come in on annual appointments for up to 3 years. And the reason for that is particularly in the Conservatory of Performing Arts, visiting faculty who are professionals working in their field, who then come into an educational environment as a visiting artist, visiting professor for 1 to 3 years. Some of them come for 1 year, some for 2, some for 3. Provide a level of transition to the employment market that someone who is, in order to balance it, we have people who have been faculty for their entire careers, and we have other people who are working professionals that come in as faculty for 1, 2, or 3 years.
Yeah, but specifically when I asked the question, I was given this answer as a way to possibly address the lack of faculty we will have in specific programs next year. Do we anticipate using this next year to help address programs that have a lack of full-time faculty?
Yes.
We do. So it's also my understanding, according to the collective bargaining agreement, that they have the same minimum salary requirement as someone of their equivalent position that they would be replacing. Is that correct?
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it wouldn't be surprising to me.
So it's just confusing to me and other students why we would try and fill the void that we just created with someone who would have to make the same minimum amount as the person who just left, who's been with Point Park for already some time.
So I'll try to answer that, but if anybody else wants to chime in, feel free to. So when we put out a voluntary retirement incentive to faculty, we didn't know who was going to take it and what disciplines they would be from. So balancing that for some departments means that we've had faculty disproportionately opting into that program from some departments, while others did not have faculty opting into that program. So when you look at it on a department by department, and that's why the deans are the best people to make these kind of decisions, they are looking very granularly at their department to say, here is the specific skill set that I need to have for next year to meet the needs of my students. And then we will utilize visiting faculty who would come in for, like I said, 1, 2, or 3 years to do that while we're rebuilding in that program. So I can't say that the position will always be a visiting faculty member. I could say that for next year, given where we are in the hiring cycle for faculty, it would not be ideal for us to say, well, we had somebody who opted to retire that we weren't anticipating, so let's go hire somebody full-time right now at the end of the year. The better solution is to say, let's hire a visiting person for a period of time until we can do a full search to get the right person in that position.
Yeah, and that makes sense, but it does raise the question. We said that it was stated that if more people had taken the retirement benefit, that we would have been able to let go of less non-tenured full-time faculty. But if it was always the plan to maybe fill the gap with some visiting full-time faculty, it just kind of creates a discrepancy there where.
Well, I see where you're going, and I could see why it would definitely feel that way. The challenge would be if we had more people who took it that were spread evenly across every department, that would be true. But since you can't really predict who's going to opt in and who's not going to opt in, if you have everybody that opts in from one department, then you're going to have holes in that department that you need to fill starting in the fall.
Then I guess we could have never really predicted which faculty would have not been renewed if we didn't know the spread, what the spread was going to be. Because anyway, that's a bit confusing. And I think that's something we should talk about another time. But I did want to make a final point to say that many of these issues that students have or asking about right now existed long before the pandemic. And I don't want it to all these issues to be attributed to this existential crisis that there's nothing we can do about, because I think many of these problems are just being exacerbated by it. And I just want that on the record. I think we have a long way to go, and I hope to be part of that process. And I hope we don't have to hope for a next time in order for me to be a part of that process. I thought we made a lot of progress this year, and this, to me, was a step back in terms of transparency for the student body. So I know we all have places to be. There's a lot more Q&As, but
Yeah, we'll make sure, Dennis, that we answer all of the unanswered questions that are in the Q&A, and those will be directed to you, and then you can distribute them to the student body, or Keith can distribute them to the student body. One way or another, we will make sure that every question is answered. And I would like to remind all students that students can submit questions anytime. Dean Palo, what's that address? It's questions at
questions@pointpark.edu. There are a number of people that have access to that, and we get questions on a regular basis and answer those questions when received. So yes, questions@pointpark.edu.
Thank you. And Dennis, you're right. We've worked very well together. You in particular, the student government, on a lot of things related to how the university is operating this year. And it is our intention to continue to work with you and to continue to work with the student government on the many issues that we will have going forward. So thank you for your willingness to continue to work with us.
Of course.
Thank you all to our students who participated. Thank you. Media Services, Tom, thank you for helping us out. And to all of our panelists, thank you very much. And we will make sure that all of these questions are answered. And then Dean Palo can make sure that they are distributed accordingly. Thank you very much, everyone.
Yep, thank you. I would just encourage everyone, there will be another town hall held soon with the faculty that could not be included in this town hall. And I would just encourage everyone to be in attendance for that. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.